Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick Madvertising podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of content, creativity, technology, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest. We have Rich Kahn. He is the co-founder and CEO of Anura. Rich has been in digital marketing since 1993. He's an OG. He even beats me by a few years, which is awesome. We love our OG marketing friends. He's been around for pretty much every shift that we've seen in internet technology and consumer. He and his wife Beth built eZanga from the ground up, eventually growing it to an Inc. 5000 company 5 years in a row. Really interesting guy, but I think the best part of having him on the show is how his new company Anura came about. It was while running their own ad business, Rich realized that a significant percent of the traffic that they were buying simply wasn't behaving like a real human. So rather than just accept it, he used this as the reason to build his company. I love that story. Of course, you know, the company that I'm at now, AdQuick, we came about because it was really hard to buy out of home ads, and the team at Instacart, one of their early employees built AdQuick, which of course we're at now. But anyway, it's such a great reason to create a startup is to notice a problem. So I'm excited to talk to Rich today. Rich, welcome to the show and thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
And so, yeah, I want to dig into the origin story more because it's so interesting. And we talk about ad fraud on the show all the time. It's certainly a reason we have a lot of our users is they're frustrated with what's happening online. But you weren't originally trying to build an ad fraud company, which I mentioned. You were running an ad network and realized, wow, this traffic isn't exactly what we thought. So what was the moment when you realized, wow, there's a company here and I can actually help advertisers and marketers?
Let's call it the reluctant business, right? Because I didn't want to build it. I remember talking to my partner and saying, okay, I've identified the problem. It's a fraud related problem. This was like 2004. And I said, I just want to go license the technology, bolt it onto our platform and go about it. I don't want to be the guy solving fraud. But in 2004, there were no technologies that did it. In fact, the first commercially available fraud solution I don't think came out, I think it was like 2009. So we were looking for a product that didn't exist. And we had a choice. Either we're going to lose our company or we solve the problem. And I'm a developer. I've been a developer since age 9. And I said, you know what? I have no choice. We're going to solve it ourselves. And I wrote a little piece of code. I think it was less than 100 lines of code. It was very short and sweet. And it worked great until it didn't. So, of course, one thing about fraud is it constantly evolves. And as it evolved, I had to evolve the software. And we kept doing it over time because it was protecting our company. Our customers were happy. We were growing as a business. Like I said, we made the Inc. 5000 5 years in a row. Just a little plug, Anura, this is our 4th year in a row. We just made the Inc. 5000 for the 4th year in a row. So pretty happy about that. I actually tried to do some research. How many entrepreneurs had multiple companies make the Inc. 5000 5 years in a row? And unfortunately, there's no data out there to tell me, but I'm sure it's a short list. Anyway, so kind of exciting. So it was doing really well. And then probably 10 years later, so probably pushing 2014, 15, I've had clients over the years asking, but like it got to the point where I'm like, I can't ignore this. I have people asking, if not begging, to take this technology and use it outside of our network. In the beginning stages, it was like, no, if you want this clean traffic, you can only come to us to buy it. But you know, you can't be, I mean, Google doesn't, people who buy from Google buy from other platforms. I mean, you can never own the entire marketplace. So we've said, all right. So I tested it on one person. I'm like, let's just try it with this one person. So we jerry-rigged it. It was really ugly integration, but we said, let's just see how this works. Because this guy was claiming he was getting a fraud on organic traffic. And I was like, this I got to see. So I was just curious from a data hound scenario, let's see what this looks like. So we went ahead and hooked it up into his system. And sure enough, it was over 30% fraud on his organic traffic. And I couldn't fathom that. Like, it made no sense. But sure enough, it was there. So we basically put a filter in place to block that. And all of a sudden, all the metrics went up. Revenue went up. He was like happy. He's like, all right, how do I pay you for this? And I'm like, we got to figure that out. So that's when we started to put the pieces of the puzzle together and figured out, let's get this thing going.
That's a great origin story. I love that. Companies built out of, seeing this need, people asking for it. It's probably one of the cooler ways that a B2B company comes about. And like you said, you're a little bit reluctant to have done it. And I think there's something to that where you're just pulled into it. And it's like, it's almost like the world needs it so bad that you have to do it. So Rich, you probably have an opinion on this. I've read research on this and I've had guests mention it on the show, but how widespread in your estimation is the fraud and fake bot traffic and inflated numbers? And then also a follow-up, is it more biased to mobile or is it also desktop? How do you think about just the broad problems of fraud?
So it's funny you asked, because I just published about a month ago or so an executive briefing. Usually what we do is like a year-end review of the previous year, talk about fraud trends, we paint a number on it and everything else. So there's a lot of research that goes into this. And normally my team puts it together, and we had a lot of other projects going on. And I'm like, let me at least help them out. Let me do some research. And AI has been great with research. I mean, you can do so much research, so much faster. The nice thing is I'll bounce, through, probably the two main ones I use is ChatGPT and I use Claude. And while one's doing its research, I'm talking to the other one, prompting the other to do some additional research, answering questions for this one. So it's like bouncing back and forth, and then you get all this rich data. So anyway, to answer your question, last year as a global society, the number looks like we spent about $750 billion in digital marketing. Of that, our conservative estimate was 165 billion was stolen by fraud. And most people don't they don't look at that number as like a big number. And I tell the story a lot. I'm a big Shark Tank fan. And I love it when because I just love new technologies and entrepreneur stories and stuff like that, like their origin stories and how they got started and what led them to this, build this product. I'm into all that stuff. So that's why this podcast was really interesting to join when I got invited to it. So anyway, looking at the data, it's mind baffling. So like you go on Shark Tank and they'll talk about, hey, we got this new product and this is going to address a $7 billion market. And they say $7 billion because B with a big billion, and everyone's like, oh my God, it's 7 billion. But 165 billion was stolen last year due to fraud. Now, the reason why I say that's conservative, that estimates that 22% of the market was fraud. That's about what the number is, about 22%. However, in my briefing, I said, let me look at our data. Now, we're not capturing, a huge amount, but we have a few hundred clients that we're scanning traffic for, and we're I think last year we identified something like almost $3 billion in fraud that we identified for our clients. So it's a sample. It's enough of a sample to get some data. So I looked at it for month, from January all the way through December, month over month, and we typically average between 25 and 28% fraud. So the 22% would be considered conservative for last year. Well, what gets very interesting is this year. So I started looking at this year because there was a big AI attack that took place last year. We had a massive update that we had to put together. It took a long time to put together because we had to reinvent the wheel on how we collect data and all this other stuff. But what's interesting, January was 26%, so fell right in the norm. And then it started to climb month over month. And based on my report, June was the first month it tipped over 40%. So now you're looking at a 50%, more than a 50% growth in 6 months of this year. And I attribute that all to AI. And by the way, that's what we're catching. No fraud solution in the market is going to guarantee they catch it all. It's impossible. There's always something out there. There's always some new attack. There's always some new version of browser that has a new hole in it. There's always something coming out. In fact, we just rolled out a new update that we've been playing with for the last couple of weeks now. And, some of the testing, we have to go back and test over 500 browser versions just to make sure it's compatible and it's not triggering false positives, and, everything works as expected, and the technology works across all those different, it used to be back in the day, I just have to make sure it works for Windows or maybe it works for Mac and I'm happy. No, each browser is almost like its own operating system. So now you're back testing hundreds of versions of browsers to make sure your technology works. And it's just, so here's a bigger question. Let's assume that $750 billion that was spent last year was 100% fraud. everybody would recognize there's no performance. I'm out of the game. Let me go find a different place to advertise. And that of course, we're never going to hit 100%. But if they hit 100%, the whole system would, in my opinion, just shut down. This is 2000, right? .com bubble burst. Most people don't know it. It burst because of fraud, but that was back in 2000. We could talk more about that later because I lost a huge potential sale of a company back then because of that. Anyway, so, but according to my sample right now, we're at 40%. What's the number between 40 and 100% that things start to go south with digital marketing as a whole? I don't know, but there is a number and we're approaching it fairly quick. So I'm curious to see how the next 6 months or 12 months are going to play out.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and certainly some percent of the AI bot traffic are like legitimate bots and spiders trying to crawl the internet to train things.
Mhm.
But there's obviously a lot of malicious actors and people trying to game systems as well. I'm curious, do you have an opinion on like the worst places, like the most fraudulent places in the ad tech stack, if you had to list some of the most and least fraudulent places? If I'm I'm an advertiser and I'm buying media online, like typically what do you see as the worst and maybe the cleanest places if you weren't going to even use a platform to try and suss out the bad traffic?
Sure. I find out as I get older, I have opinions on everything. So, um, first off, if you're looking at the least amount besides obviously organic, you're going to be looking at most of your search and social. That's going to sit somewhere between 10 and 15%, depending on the actual platform that you choose to go with. But on average, when we normally put an average on it, we put a 15% fraudulent activity on those channels. That's sizable. That's a huge amount of budget. If I'm going to look at the highest end ones, you're looking at affiliate. Affiliate runs around 45%. And then right behind or right in front of that is programmatic, which is like one of the biggest channels out there. So your programmatic, your ads, your video, we catch on average buys being bought through DSPs that buy programmatic advertising at over 50% fraud. Now, affiliate marketing is one of the most cost-effective marketings because it's so easily controllable and it's a true marketplace. But you got to know what's real and what's fake. If you eliminate the fraud, it becomes one of your most advantageous channels. Programmatic, same thing. It's like you can get broad reach across lots of websites, but you got to know where the fraud is.
And why do you think that some of the larger tech companies haven't done more to remove the fraudulent traffic? I've always felt like there are, like, as a marketer, when I look at a lot of the large platforms, it seems to me like there's pretty trivial things they could do to increase the quality of even just their own platform, like not even just the traffic, like just the way the platform works. And they're either not incentivized to do that, or they just don't have people internally who care, or maybe their goals are different than my goals as a user. It's just always been striking to me how little some of the, and not all, I think that there's certainly like real efforts at a company like Google to trend fraud down. But I've always felt like at a lot of internet companies I use, they just don't seem to care that much. Is it a talent problem? Is it an incentive problem? What do you think could be done?
It's a combination of things, but I'll talk about the DSP space first because that, to me, that's a technology problem, right? So I don't know how well you or the audience is with DSPs, but this is where this is the demand side platform where you buy programmatic banner ads, you buy video ads, and any DSP worth its weight is already using a fraud solution, right? So everybody feels protected. Oh, they're using fill in the blank. Any one of my competitors, doesn't matter. But what people don't understand is that fraud is actually spelled out. There's an industry standard set by the IAB, the 4As, and the ANA. And in that standard, they don't refer to it as fraud. They refer to it as IVT, invalid traffic. Most people have heard this term. What most people don't know is that there are two classifications of IVT. You have GIVT, which is general invalid traffic. These are your data center attacks, basic bots, known bot attack and stuff like that. Then you have your SIVT, which is your sophisticated invalid traffic, your advanced bots, AI bots, malware, human fraud forms, things like that. So in the DSP world, there's the RTB sections, a real-time bidding process that has to happen in 100 milliseconds, the magic 100 milliseconds. From the time a visitor lands on a landing page, a request is made into the RTB, and they've got 100 milliseconds to turn around and fill it with the most profitable ad, most profitable, most profitable and most relevant ad to that visitor at that time. They got 100 milliseconds to deliver that ad creative. So in that 100 milliseconds, they don't have a whole lot of time to sniff out fraud. So what they use basically some type of IP address lookup tool, and they call it a pre-bid tool. And they basically leave that pre-bid tool 10 to 20 milliseconds to respond back with, is this good or is this bad? So in that time, they only have time to look up IP address, user agent, maybe one or two other data points. And in that, you're not going to be able to identify fraud. And I'll give you guys a real example in a second. Now, on the flip side, clients can deploy a JavaScript tool, which is an SIVT filter. This, like our filter, and I can't speak on other filters, but our filter collects over 800 data points on the environment, trying to find, AI fraud, trying to find human fraud farms. So where the DSPs are using, hey, we're using a fraud solution so the client feels protected. It's catching 1% to 3% fraud, which is about what it's going to catch. Fraudsters know this, so they use sophisticated attacks on a DSP to get around it. So I'll give you an example of how this would look in real terms. So let's say somebody lands on a landing page and it pings the DSP, and the DSP says, okay, let me look up this IP address and user agent. What do I see? I see, oh, okay, it's coming from a Starbucks, legitimate IP address. You can't block all of Starbucks because hundreds of people use that IP address throughout the course of a day. You look at the user agent. Oh, it's properly formatted iPhone 17 Pro. Everything looks good. Okay, let's bid on that inventory and let's get this guy ad creative. Now that same visitor is scanned using our technology, and we're collecting over 800 data points. And one of those data points comes back and says, this iPhone doesn't have a touchscreen. Now we all know every iPhone ever created had a touchscreen. So that tells me, hey, there might be a spoofing attack. And with us, what we're going to do is scan more data points to try to prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is a spoofing attack. And once we can confirm that, then we can say, okay, it's bad. So here's a situation where the technology said, hey, this is good, but the more deeper scan found out that it wasn't good. And most clients buying this traffic have no idea about those two classifications. They just say, hey, they're using a fraud solution. It's catching, oh, it's all 1% to 3% fraud. They're already filtering it out. I don't have to worry about it. Let me just spend my budget. And then they run around trying to make good decisions based on bad data, saying, hey, wait a second, what am I missing? Like, I'm buying all this data, I'm making good decisions, and I'm not getting to where I need to be. I actually had a client recent that was buying traffic through a DSP. And when we scanned their DSP traffic, it was over 90% fraud. And the only thing we can come to figure out was that the agency that was managing this campaign was managing it to a series of KPIs that the fraudsters knew how to fake, so that the management was actually pushing more fraud. They were actually buying more fraud because it looked like it performed better, and didn't realize at the end of the day they were just buying more junk.
Yeah, so let's talk about this more. So we talked about the technology a bit. Let's talk more about the marketer, because you said some really interesting things about, and I've certainly seen this in my consulting days, where you had senior marketers not really thinking about, ad fraud, or not really thinking about like web spam or things like this too much. In say, like, you're talking to different marketers, how much is, say, like a average S&P company marketer thinking about ad fraud? Is it something that you see is more normal in these orgs, or is it something that maybe like the top % of marketers actively consider when they're building their campaigns, when they're building their ad tech stack? I'm just curious from like a sophistication standpoint, how you see that.
Yeah, it's not talked about enough. So a lot of marketers, what they do is they feel the pain, but they don't understand what's causing it. So like I said, one of the things we always say is, people don't wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I got a fraud problem I got to solve. That's a small percentage of people, right? But the average person is like, I just came back from a trade show a couple months ago, and we were sitting down with Fortune 1000 companies. And the one question we were asking them was, do you trust your data, your marketing data? And every one of them, absolutely not. Why not? And it's like, something doesn't feel right. Like, and these are people who have been doing it for years, right? These are smart, intelligent people. They just don't know it's a fraud related problem, but they know something's off. Something doesn't click. Something's not making sense. They're doing everything right. They're doing all the stuff that they've learned over the years to do, and it's not getting the result that they expect. So they have a gut feeling that says not to trust the marketing data, and they know something's off. And because of that, we try to obviously present, hey, it's probably a fraud problem. So what we offer them is a free traffic quality audit, so we can audit the traffic and find out, is it a fraud problem? If it's a fraud problem, that's an easy problem to solve. If it's not a fraud problem, then keep looking. But hint, it's almost always a fraud problem.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think, at least from my perspective, when you talk to really tech savvy CMOs, they think about ad fraud. They think about having really good analytics, really good data. And then if you talk to and it's not even an age thing, just more like vibes based CMOs, they're just, they don't really think too much about it. And I think there's an obvious problem here. And it's interesting because, like, the ad fraud problem, if you were to compare it to, like, the the housing bubble of the 2008 housing bubble, that was really, like, connected to the global economy. It almost seems like the ad fraud problem will go on as long as marketers and technologists are willing to bear the pain and not take action, because it's just wasted spend. Like, it's not necessarily, and I think there's another interesting thing here for marketers. If they solve ad fraud, isn't that just more money going to creators who are doing things people like? It's more money for, really competent and quality networks and websites and people. It seems like there's a lot of incentive there should be a lot of incentive to stop giving money to fraudsters and bad actors, when there's so many more great creators we could be funding with that money. And there's so much more revenue, of course, for our companies to be able to, lower prices and have, better marketing campaigns and whatnot. So it seems like there should be a lot more incentive to take care of this problem.
You know what? It's funny. Like I said, I've been building this product since 2000. I launched the first version in 2005. So coming up over 21 years now. And we saw it in our own company. Like, we didn't start this to build a spin-off company and start up a whole new company. The last thing I needed was another platform to build. We wanted to focus on just, solving the problem we had in our company. And as we solved the problem, our clients spent more money with us. And it got to the point, I remember having several conversations in a given year, and I was like, oh my God, it's almost as if these guys are talking to each other. They were saying that our quality is so much better than what they're getting on the outside of our network, that even though we don't have a lot of volume, we get first crack at their budget. Used to be Google, used to be at the time Yahoo. They would get first crack at the budget. They were giving us first crack at the budget. They would come to us and say, hey, last month, last quarter, you spent $50,000 a month or $100,000 a month for us. Can you double that? And we'd look at the numbers and, like, I would love to, I just can't. I don't want to commit to something I know I can't guarantee I can hit, because quality traffic is far and few between based on how we acquire our traffic, and we'll do what we can. But it was nice to be considered as the first, we get the first crack of the budget. Everybody else gets the leftovers. It wasn't like that. And it was all because we were cleaning the traffic. So when I talk to clients now that are using our technology, we have clients that, attribute a lot of their growth to us, because what they're doing is they start off with, okay, we identify, let's just call it 25% fraud. So instead of just saving the 25%, we're taking that 25% budget and stop giving it to fraudsters and start putting it into an audience that's going to convert. And all of a sudden they see a significant lift in ROAS across the board. Then they take that, reinvest it back into the company, and they start growing the company. It gets to the point these companies are significantly growing and giving us credit for, portion of that growth, because we're helping them to identify what's working, what's not working, and the quality of their traffic is getting better. So their ROASs are increasing, and it makes them grow as a company. So, it's funny when we look at it, like, the guys that really know the space, like the really intelligent guys, know fraud's a problem and are doing something about it, whether they're licensing a third party, they're doing something internal, they're doing something, right? They get it's a problem and they look at it. Then you got some people out in the marketplace that are like, that's a hoax, doesn't exist. We're collecting analytics at such a deep level. Like, there's no question. It's not a billion dollar market, because, fraud detection is not a multi-billion dollar market because it's a hoax. It's out there. It's real. I mean, I've had talks with people that used to work in click centers, call center, human fraud farms. It's definitely a problem. And it's one that, if ignored, can really hurt your business.
Yeah, there's obviously a huge cybersecurity industry as well. It's not a made up thing. There's hacks, there's data breaches all the time. If you were to think that it didn't exist in the ad space, you're just, you're not in base reality. So Rich, let's switch gears just a little bit, because you've obviously done some great work selling into marketing leaders, probably also selling into CFOs, telling the CFO, hey, we could save, this much money. We have a lot of individual consultants and marketers and creatives who also sell into marketing leaders, whether it's, their service to make videos or make out of home ads or whatnot. Do you want to share some insights as to what you've learned selling into marketing leadership? Because it's such an interesting group to sell into. I've sold into CMOs for my career, and they're kind of varied and different, and some of them like different things. So it's always so interesting to hear from people who sell into marketers what they find works.
For us, with our product, like I said, people don't wake up and say, hey, I need a fraud solution. So if I hit a CMO up with, hey, do you need a fraud solution? They always say no, right? But when I say, are you having problems with your data? Are you're looking for ways to grow your results without spending more money? So it's almost hitting that, how do I help them grow their business? That's one of those things. Or if you happen to know that they're having issues and hitting their pain points, those seem to be the big things. Like, and again, this is hard data to find, but like, that's why I like trade shows, because you really get a chance to talk to somebody. And if I'm at a trade show and I have a meeting with somebody, I'm like, all right, what we do? We're an ad fraud solution, but what problems are you facing right now? I love to ask that question, because maybe I know somebody I can connect them with, and maybe down the road they'll come back because, hey, I know Rich hooked me up with somebody and helped me solve a problem. I got somebody call up, and it turned out they were having a fraud related problem, and they were also having some other related problem, and I was able to solve the fraud problem using our product, and I was able to get them connected with the company. I was able to solve their other problem. And sometimes there's business in it for me, and sometimes there isn't. But I feel like, if I help somebody connect with somebody and it solves a problem for them, I'm helping both companies, right? One getting a new client, one helping them solve the problem. And, you put good out into the world and good comes back. So I believe in karma, and it's always good to be a connector of different people. But when I'm really dealing with that CMO level or the C-suite, because sometimes we deal with the chief technology officers, sometimes it's a legal officer, but you're dealing with those. It's helping them solve a problem that they're currently faced with. Seems to be the best way to get in, and you just have to ask the question, like, what problems are you running into right now? If I can wave a magic wand, what problem would I solve today for you?
Yeah, I actually love in-person events as well. It's really interesting. I had a guest on the show previously who they had a new CMO who just cut the event budget, right, at a B2B firm, and they had 30% fewer qualified leads the next quarter because the CMO is like, oh, we just got to cut all these events so I can understand what's going on, even though the team told them not to do it because it wasn't as measurable. And anyway, we got into a whole discussion about, measuring in-person events. But the point is that sometimes some of the best marketing we do isn't perfectly put into a dashboard. And I think that's okay. There's some things that are faith-based or relationship-based, or, to your point, adding value and having these connections. And so sometimes the marketing you can't measure is the highest value marketing. Like you can't you can't really put a price on that, on the person you built such a great relationship with that they recommend you to, 10 other leaders, right? How are you going to put that in the dashboard? So I always tell marketers, you don't have to become so moneyball brained that everything has to be perfectly measurable, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned something really interesting about, you're talking about sometimes, I'm gonna edit this part out. You said something interesting. No, I can't remember. Okay, 30 minutes. Edit that part. Okay, so Rich, let's end by talking about, you obviously run a team of people, a lot of young marketing and technology people coming into the business world in an AI first world. What advice would you give to young people who are coming into a place where so much is automated and so much of the previously junior level work isn't there? Like, how should they navigate their early careers? What should they do to stand out and to get their first positions?
Well, it's funny, like you talk about that, and it's kind of weird. Like I look at it a couple different ways. Like AI is a tool, right? For decades, we've always had different types of tools, but AI is the latest and greatest tool that's out in the marketplace. One point, in my career, it was, hey, the web browser is something new. Learn how to use it and learn how to navigate it and become good with it. Same with AI. Like right now, it's an AI world. Everybody's switching to AI. Everyone's trying to save money with AI, but not everybody knows how to use AI. So one of the things I'll talk to my team. In fact, we're working on different projects and we're using AI as one of the tools that we use to help us with research and, bug hunts and things like that. We use it for different things. It's learn to be somebody who really knows how to implement AI. Because again, not everybody knows how to do that. And as people try to implement it and fail, you need to have people on your team that know how to work and run it correctly or maximize the usage out of it. That's one of the things that I always tell people. And something I post to my team, we have weekly meetings with the entire company where I get on and just update people on maybe some new accounts that came in or new features that are rolling out, just because I run into the office with a couple different people here or there. We have a few remotes. We have another office in Texas. So they don't get that in-person experience with me. So I try to do it once a week where I get on the call. So last week, or actually in this week, I posed them with a simple question. What's something you can do today to help the company reach its goal for, we have a goal set for the end of 2027. So we have a 18-month goal that we set, or that I set. And what can you do as an individual, as an employee of this company today to help the company get to that goal? And it's being a team player. I don't refer to my staff as employees. I refer to them more for the most part as teammates. We're all in this together. We're all working. Every job is just as important as the next. So how do we as a team get there? So what, as a team, break it down to an individual. You're sitting at your desk. What can you do today to help us get there as a company?
I love
Stuff
that.
like that.
Yeah, I love that. And I find the companies I've been at that have considered it a team effort have tended to do the best, like big or small. So I think that's a good place to end. Rich, thank you for joining us today. And just to end, where can people go to connect with you online? We'll also put links in the show notes, but let people know where to find you.
Sure. A couple resources. One, I'm on LinkedIn, very easy to find. Rich Kahn at Anura, and you'll find me all over the place. But one of the resources I'll let everybody know is go to anura.io. We have tons of resources there, blogs, white papers. The executive brief that I talked a little bit about on today's episode is listed there. And then for those of you guys that are curious about your traffic, we offer a free traffic quality audit where we scan your traffic. There's no cost, no obligation, no credit card. It's just, let's find out how much of a fraud problem you have and where it's coming from and see if there's something we can do about it. So most people don't know. They suspect. We take all the guesswork out. We do it for them, and we do it for free.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, and we will see everyone for a new episode next week.